What would you do if you were called to help a severely underserved community? Would you start that journey? Would you take that first step if someone told you it would take 13 years to see it start to take form? Would you be willing to daily hone your skills over an extended period of time? Could you deal with the self doubt that comes with every setback you face, improving along the way as you hear the accounts of the men that defend the freedom of this country and have to overcome on a daily basis? To be able to handle the pressure of what you've learned over the course of the journey and face the enormity of making the film a reality and worthy of its audience after having been turned down multiple times. Join us as I speak with actor, writer, director, and veteran advocate Steven Grayhm about his latest film, Sheepdog, the mission of Teamhouse Studios, and what he's had to overcome along the way. This is Veteran Success Story. Today's guest on Veteran Success Story is actor and director Steven Grayhm. Now, I just want to come out and explain that Steven is not a veteran himself, but he is most assuredly a veterans advocate in what he's doing within Teamhouse Studios, as well as some of the other work that he's done. But it's really something that's been on his heart to bring forward veteran issues and be an asset within the veteran community, which, I mean, I think from this film, it just shows between his project and his film and how everything integrates together. It's pretty amazing what he's put together. I first made the acquaintance of Steven back when my old first sergeant, who went on to become a command sergeant major within the 82nd Airborne, Donald McAllister, he worked with Steven. I think they actually met through a nonprofit. I think it was Helicopter for Heroes, or Helicopters for Heroes, and then they ended up working together later on one of Steven's films known as The Secret of Cinchony. Mac has had nothing but good to say about Steven, and honestly, after meeting the guy and kind of seeing where his heart is, I knew that he was somebody I had to have on the show. I'm not going to hold the episode up any longer, as I've already kind of spoken too much, and Steven does a much better job at articulating everything that he's done, and we kind of really get into it in the episode. So, welcome to yet another Veteran Success. Today on Veteran Success Story, I have guest actor, writer, and director Steven Grayhm. I know in the talk beforehand, I was talking with Steven about some of the work and stuff that he did, but more recently, and most recently, is a movie coming out, Sheepdog. It's slated for 2025. But really, just to clarify with people, and I know this was one of your concerns, Steven, in the beginning here, was that you're not a veteran, but you're portraying a veteran on camera. And that's actually one of the whole reasons why I have you here. And what drew me to cover this and talk to you is that you're someone whose heart has really been in the veteran space, and you're doing stuff with veterans through your project Teamhouse Studios. And, you know, do you want to talk a little bit about, I mean, we can talk later on about it, but just your whole mission there and your heart is really in the right place with all of this. And it's amazing to see. It's crazy to have you on as a guest. And thank you so much for coming on.
Well, William, thank you for having me, and it's a complete honor. Big fan of your book. I was saying to in the virtual green room, is very intense. The attention to detail is unbelievable. And you mentioned many times my good buddy Don McAllister, Mac, in there, and it's like learning a totally different side to Mac. I mean, I know he's Sergeant Major, but to me he's like Mac the teddy bear, and I cast him in the first film I made, and you know, it's unbelievable. So it's really special. Yeah, so Team House it's I founded this production company about 4 years ago with a commitment to train veterans in front and behind the camera. And I was very fortunate on Sheepdog to hire 17 veterans and 5 Gold Star family members. On the first film that I made, which was sort of like a proof of concept, we were able to hire, I believe it was 11 veterans and 1 Gold Star family member. So we've been able to expand the program with each project, and it's been an incredible honor. People often ask me, what's it like, when you're training or you're having veterans on your film set, And the easiest response to that is y'all are used to a schedule. You're early risers. You don't complain when it sucks.
Yeah.
Um, you work with your hands a lot. A lot of movie making. Movie making is, for the most part, very working class, blue collared. You're working with your hands. You know, the kind of the Hollywood aspect of it is very far down the road when you're like putting the movie out and you're doing press and stuff like that. But the actual mechanics of it um, are very much what most people could actually relate to in their day to days, just in terms of moving lights, changing lenses, you know,
Yeah.
carrying sandbags, going up a hill with sandbags, and you know, um, but it's been incredibly rewarding, and um, one of the great things that I personally get out of it is seeing veterans, especially ones that have been struggling, seeing them sort of like revitalize, coming back to life in some extent, and I've seen it firsthand. Some of that is what we try to do is group the veterans together, and again, Mac will tell you that it was like being back in the barracks again. You know, when he roomed at an Airbnb on my first project with four other guys. uh, Three of them were veterans, one of them a civilian, and he was just like, you know, he'll talk about it to today, you know, about how much he misses that month that he spent, and that camaraderie. And you know, you wrap on the movie, or you wrap on your day of filming, you go home and they're all having chow together, and whether they're talking about stories that happened that day on set or in their service, and there's that camaraderie and that brotherhood again. And I mean,
Yeah, you
I
you
mean, what
put
an honor.
veterans around together, and they
Yeah.
do. They flock to each other, but then there's that instant rapport built right in. And I- so I've been on a movie set. I had the opportunity to be on a set for just a small Netflix movie, but that was recorded. And I think the guy was interning. This was during the GI Bill stuff, but
Hmm.
I was interning for a celebrity chef who was also playing a part in this particular movie. So he was like, "Hey, why don't you join me on set?" And I got to see the mechanics of everything happening behind there. And honest to God, I swear, Steve, this is not something that I'm making up for the show or whatnot. But honestly, being on a movie set and seeing the call sheet and seeing, you know, the rundown and how things needed to move to have an effective movie set, I was like, this is like a military operation. This is 100. This was running exactly, and I could see where it would suck, but I could also see the draw to it. And I have seen the draw to it. I mean, the stuff you did with Mac when he talks about what you guys did on set and he just lights up, and he loves, that purpose that's seen there. Or, so our old command sergeant major that was over Burt Puckett, he
Hmm.
worked on a few things within Hollywood and still is doing stuff within the film industry. And the same thing that drew him there. He was like, it's the closest thing I found to the military since I've been in. So it's cool that you've kind of come across and founded this to where you recognize it, but you're putting it into something to where it's giving into the veteran space and you're enabling people. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think that seeing that empowerment has been has become now my life's work. I think that, you know, my commitment to this, as long as, you know, as long as I can continue to make projects and be able to hire folks in the veteran community, you know, my dedication and my commitment to this is ever long. And you know, it's interesting with Mac, and I do want to say for folks that are listening, when we say that, you know, comparing it to military, obviously no one's comparing this to being in combat or being in country per se. It's more about the structure and the camaraderie post service in your retirement, and that's really what we're getting at. And Mac again, you know, when he speaks to this. Um, I do realize, and I've seen this across the country in my research for Sheepdog, his longing for that brotherhood. And
Yes.
there's a line in Sheepdog that Von D. Curtis Hall, who plays a Vietnam veteran in it, he says, you know, I bet you wondering where's my tribe. And I'm not talking about no friendship. I'm talking about brotherhood.
It's
And
powerful.
yeah, and
Mm.
so seeing that firsthand, and I don't know, it's just it's pretty gratifying.
That's so, I mean, just it's admirable that, oh man, just so admirable of what you've done with this and like trying to do that reconnect and be part of the solution. And I mean, this is something where I mean, let's go backwards because this is something to where this has been a vision of yours since what, 2011?
Yes. So I'll give you the origin story on Sheepdog. So from a very like sort of um, basic level, I'm the son of my mother was an immigrant during the Second World War. Her father was a POW. Her mother was also a POW. They were Polish farmers that were enslaved on their own land during the Second World War. They fled to Canada and started a new life there. My grandfather was tortured. He was separated from my grandmother and was on the run from the Nazis for quite some time.
Mm,
And in in their liberation, when I was growing up, and he would share stories, from a young age, that he wouldn't even share with my mom or anyone. And he talks about the liberation, and the way he described it was like out of a movie. And when you're growing up with that, it's impossible to not feel indebted. I would not be here if those brave, American troops didn't come over that horizon, um, to save the world from tyranny. And so that was instilled in me at a very young age. And maybe, I just couldn't really figure out a way to ever pay that debt back. In 2010, my car broke down 3 hours north of Los Angeles. I was up in Vancouver, Canada, doing a film, and I wrapped on it, and I drove through the night back home to Los Angeles. And so I'd been on the road about 21 hours, car breaks down, and I call AAA, and they send out the local guy. And the guy who picked me up was like, "Hop in, partner. We got a long haul back to LA. Let's get comfortable." And over the course of that 3 hour drive, he began to open up about his own personal struggles. So he began with like his marital issues, financial issues. Then he got into his service and his
mm,
deployments. And it became very clear, he divulged that he was a veteran, that he did multiple deployments to Iraq. And I don't think I said but two or three words on that drive to LA. I mean, I just listened. And I couldn't believe that a guy who had three children, that was, prescribed a myriad of pharmaceuticals from the VA, was facing bankruptcy, that had deep trauma. And I'm watching him sort of smile through the pain, and it
mm.
was devastating. I get back to LA, drops me off, and I couldn't stop thinking about him. And I thought to myself, there must be more people like him. There must be. And so I put a map of the country on my wall on a corkboard, and I began to reach out, via Facebook, via different, VSOs, government groups, VA, VFW, just to see if anybody would talk to me. And I think at the time, I think I had an idea that maybe this would become a screenplay, but I didn't know yet. I needed to see more of it, if you will.
Yeah.
So I committed to doing a road trip the summer of 2011. And I went across the country, again, meeting with anyone and everyone who would speak with me. And the very first veteran that I met with was Staff Sergeant George Rice. And it was in McAllen, Texas, the southern part of the state. I show up there, and we get talking and whatnot, and I was with my my friend Matt Dallas, who's brilliant in this film. He plays a veteran, and so after Matt and we shut the camera off. George says, "You're the writer, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Come with me." And he shares this military deployment that kind of went sideways. And it took my breath away. And he took his in memoriam band off, which I still wear to this day. And he said, "Don't let me down."
Mm,
And I looked at it, and at first I was like, I didn't want to take it.
yeah.
And he was like, "Don't let me down." And so I got back in the car, and I had a
Wow.
decision to make. Do I go back to Los Angeles? Because I was like, though we were naive and idealistic, like, oh, we're going to go out there and change the world. In that moment, we knew that we had bit off more than we could chew. And we were like, are we the people to be trusted with these stories? Like, this is a, a pretty great responsibility. And then what do we do with all these stories? And then, you know what I mean? Like in your,
Oh no, that's a heavy charge. I mean, that
yeah,
alone right there, I know, I mean, you said stuff about the book that I wrote in the beginning, but I had a lot of the same thing to where I was like, there's no way I can put this down. Like, and there's no way I could do these guys justice. I still don't think that had done them justice. I still feel it needs more work, but at the same time, there comes a
yeah,
point to where it needs to be out there. But that right there, that is a heavy charge that was given you. And for you to pick that mantle up and move forward.
right. So
Wow.
we're sitting in that car in Texas, and we all know the decision that we made, which was to carry on. But we drove through the night, um, and we committed that night that we were going to, complete the mission or die trying. And I know that sounds heavy, but we meant it.
Yeah.
We meant it, and we certainly lived it, all the way to this point to have, 13 years later, to have made the film. But I will say, from that experience with George, he had made some phone calls across the country to other guys in his unit that he thought would be, that might be willing to speak with us, and we were very fortunate that some of them did sit down with us and shared their story of their service and so on. And that led ultimately to Sergeant Brad Link. Um, Brad, at the time, lived in Pittsburgh, and George said, it, he doesn't speak to any of us. He's not in a great place, but maybe he'll speak to you. I don't know. And so I waited till I got back from that road trip back home to LA. I contacted Brad, and we were talking about him coming out to Los Angeles. And I'm living in the heart of Hollywood at the time. I got helicopters going over me, sirens going down my street, and I was just thinking, there's no way I'm asking this guy to come, crash on my couch here. This is probably not going to be good for his mental health. So I committed to going to Pittsburgh, and I got a one-way ticket, to go and see him. And what was only supposed to be a couple days ended up being a month working together. And I do want to share this because, it's one of the most profound moments of my life. So 3 weeks ago, we won the jury award for Sheepdog at the Naples International Film Festival.
Yeah.
And Brad currently lives with his wife in, Panorama City. And they drove 7 hours with their dogs to join us at the festival, just to be there, just to see the film and be a part of it. They were our special guests, and they stayed for the awards ceremony on the last night. And they had given out all the awards, and there was just one left. And I'm telling you, you don't know how these things are going to go, right? And I'm sitting there, and Brad's looking at me, his wife's looking at me, and I'm shaking, right? Because I was like, what if we lose? And then if we do, is the after party going to be weird? And then, your stage fright of all of it. And I guess my fear of letting him down, I don't
Yeah.
know. And as soon as they said Sheepdog, and we were all in tears. And I turned to his wife and I turned to him. I mean, it was so surreal. It was so surreal to share that moment together after all these years, after living in his sister's attic, in the dead of winter in Pittsburgh, working together and hearing his stories and sort of putting some of the pieces together, and how inspiring, he was as an individual. And to share that just 3 weeks ago is just remarkable. I mean, I relive it in my mind because it's so surreal that we were all together to share that, you
I,
know?
I I saw that moment and stuff, and I mean, I could tell that was one of the things that pushed me over the edge to contact you on it, where I could just see, you could see it, you could see the relief off your shoulders, you could see just so much
Yeah.
behind the struggle in getting forward, like what, this whole
That's,
thing.
yeah, that's really what this was, though. Like, it's not about the award,
Yeah,
it's about the acknowledgement. And
yeah,
Matt Dallas in our acceptance speech did touch on that,
yeah.
a big part of the reason why this took 13 years is because we were laughed out of every room in Hollywood. Um, I mean, the stories I could tell you. I mean,
No,
I
I
had
bet
to,
I
yeah,
I
I'm
know.
sorry, I catch my breath on it because like William, it's an awful place. And, um, and the things that were dangled in front of us, I look back on now, and thank God we were all raised well, and thank God that we had the men and women like you that had made such a sacrifice to their country, that was always our North Star, right? So we were never for sale. We would never compromise. And I think people got sick and tired of us, right? They were just, um, and I am grateful for that. As hard as it was, as arduous and long as their road was, the end result is this beautiful movie that's authentic and impactful, and um, that I financed entirely in private equity outside of the Hollywood system, out of Texas. I never got a single note from an investor. Nobody had an agenda. Nobody put any pressure on me. So I got to tell the story that I thought would be in service of veterans, first responders, mental health workers, Gold Star families. And so it's pretty raw, but most importantly, it's honest.
Yeah. And man, just to come around, like where you just said you didn't compromise. You even, I think I listened to another interview where you were talking about one of your other films there, The Secret Ascension, the one that
Mm.
Mac was in, is that was really a film to get to where you are now, with the
Yeah,
Sheepdogs. It was
I'll
that in
yeah,
between.
I'll tell you a little bit about that. So, I've never shared this publicly before, but in I guess 4 years ago, my good friend Robert Daly passed away. And Rob I had known since I was a teenager, and he was one of my closest friends, and he had stage 4 cancer, so it was incurable. And this was in the throes of all the false starts on Sheepdog, all the broken promises, all that. So it was 2019 he was diagnosed, I believe. And I had lost friends, but this was different. This was a death sentence that we all knew was coming, and it
Yeah.
was terrifying. And I kind of looked around me, and I said to my wife, I was like, I I'm looking at my friend basically slowly dying, and like, what of all his hopes and dreams, like all the things that he's now not going to be able to achieve, and he was such an inspiration to so many of us. And I just turned to her and I said, like, I don't have the time anymore. I don't have the time. I gotta, and it was a very sort of carpe diem moment. And it was an awakening. And so I started to scribble in a journal, and I thought, I'll make something really small to prove what I could do with Sheepdog. And I started writing in a journal. My father's heritage on his side is Canadian First Nations, and I had some ideas about that because of the history here. I'm in Massachusetts right now, and
Mhm.
the history here. Um, and so I basically, wrote a story from the heart that was like a horror thriller that I made for $150,000, which I've also never shared publicly. Went to camera 4 months later and got worldwide distribution from
Yeah.
Vertical. I was able to hire, as I said, 11 veterans, and it's a beautiful film. I mean, it's definitely out of the box, but for the most part, it works, and I'm so proud of it. I mean, I don't think there might be just a handful of professional actors in it, but I hired all the local town people here because I had no money to make it. And my mother-in-law did the catering, and it was definitely a labor of love, and that was the game changer, because I was able to shop that and show private equity investors what I could accomplish and my team could accomplish with such little means to do it.
Yeah.
And that definitely put Sheepdog on the front burner. And I will tell you this, I've been on a film set, television set, 25 years in now. I've made short films, directed music videos, won a bunch of awards for that stuff. If I had not made The Secret of Cinchony, there was no Sheepdog. It 100% was film school. And it prepared me for every single fire that was going to be lit around me at 6 o'clock in the morning on the set of Sheepdog. And I'm very grateful. And that's also why I brought Sheepdog here. I mean, I kind of always knew for the last 10 years it would likely take place here,
Yeah.
but I was shown so much love through the community here. And I will say this, and this is important to note, most of the towns and cities that we went into and the families that we met with were working class, veterans, Gold Star families and whatnot, even mental health workers. And um and I wanted our film to represent that. I wanted our film to, you know, my job was just to hold the mirror up and not judge these characters that I wrote, and try to tell the most authentic and honest story that I possibly could. And here in Western Massachusetts, I felt like I was holding up the mirror. My character, Calvin, works at a paper mill that's closing, which is exactly what happened to my brother in law, who worked at the same paper mill my character is at.
Mm.
And these are salt of the earth people. These are people that work very hard every day, that are you know, trying to do the best they can with what they have. There's a strong sense of community. For the most part, folks aren't divided by politics, you know, and and when I say that, I mean it's diverse in that sense. Like, if you were to drive down this election year, drive down any one of these roads, you'd see, half the signs are for the Republican candidate and half the signs are for the Democratic candidate, and
Yeah.
everybody gets along. And so a lot spoke to me. The other thing is, it's just so incredibly beautiful. I mean, it's Western Massachusetts in Sheepdog is a character unto its own. And both my cinematographer Evans Brown shot it so beautifully, and our aerial cinematographer veteran TJ Millard. I mean, the shots, I mean, just breathtaking over the
Yeah.
Connecticut River and so on.
Oh man,
Um,
I just New England it's so I grew up in Connecticut, so I know
you grew up in
exactly what you're
Connecticut,
talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you miss it?
It is definitely I miss good parts of it. That's actually my dad was one of those kind of the manufacturing, he started the business, but he started at the ground level for someone else, and then had a manufacturing plant with people under him and everything. But it was a lot of blue collar, a lot of that, the people are focused on not the politics or not the high end of things. They might have their own views, but they're focused on the problems and working together as a community to solve that stuff. And I know exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah, I've so I grew up uh north of the border in Canada as a kid, and part of that time was on a farm in Jordan, which is just outside of Niagara Falls. And I missed that, you know. I did 21 years in Los Angeles in the heart of Hollywood in the same quarter mile radius. And boy, um it's been really refreshing and welcomed to return to the East Coast, especially a place like New England where it's so beautiful, you know.
There's something with that, and it's good for the soul. It really is
Mm.
to get out, in the woods or just, these little towns that are so picturesque and everything, but surrounding yourself, the people out there. I know a lot of the Northeast they say that we're cold, but at the same
Well,
time, it's really not.
I tease my wife about that. There is a New Englander sort of vibe, which
Yes.
it has been described, not by me, but it has been described as cold. I think it's more of like it's a very sort of suck it up. There's a some people would say a rigidness. I say it's more of a resilience,
Yeah.
you know, um, which is interesting. And if you're, for some people, you got to adapt a little bit to it. But uh, it's definitely endearing once you're sort of aware of that. But I mean, again, it takes a village to pull something off like this on as we did on Sheepdog, and I couldn't be more grateful and indebted to the community here. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Steve, do you mind? I know like we're talking on the movie and stuff
Mhm.
today and everything, but do you want to go back a little bit too about the path to there? You were making, films in school. You
Mhm.
went into the acting side of things. Kind of look just your different roles and stuff. You got a wide range. You're doing
Yeah,
comedy with the Wayans brothers,
I
and then
did.
you're doing more serious stuff. You do a horror thriller film, but it has
Yeah.
like this emotional. It's wild to see, but at the same time, this big culmination coming into a project like Sheepdog, and I, being from someone I've done some different stuff. It's almost like you look back, at least from my experience. I don't know. You could tell me if it's
Mhm.
yours, but looking back and going, oh, that's what that was for. And starting to realize like maybe something that you saw a struggle in, or you're like, what is this for? Why am I doing this right now? And then it comes back later and you're like, oh my God, I didn't, I didn't foresee that. It was like the universe was setting you up all along. You just didn't see it until the time was right.
Well, the amazing part about that is that there's a why for every project I've ever done in my career. I can tell you, I've never just done a project just because.
Mm,
Um, and there were times that I needed the gig. Like I was, I've been through the whole gamut that you've heard, the classic living in your car in between gigs. I've worked every handyman job. But I do know the why for everything that I've ever done. And it's funny talking about white chicks. Um, so as a kid, I grew up on In Living Color, and that was
okay.
one of my favorite shows. I used to impersonate half those characters from Fire Marshal Bill to Wanda. I used to put on like a wig like Jamie Foxx and do the whole lip. I'm not doing that on this show right now, but hey. Um, and uh, I mean, it was my favorite show. In Living Color was my favorite show. And so when the White Chicks audition came, I actually passed on it because I said to my agent, I said, I think I'm funny to my friends, but like the most terrifying thing for me would be to do stand up, right? Even though I've talked in front of hundreds of people before but to be funny, that's a totally different skill set. And at the time, I had just graduated from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in England. I was doing like I played Hamlet on stage. I literally just come off a run of Hamlet in Vancouver, Canada. And I think it was probably a mixture of taking myself probably too seriously, but I also think that I respected the art of comedy. I respected that, and I think that you just need to go to an open mic and see someone bomb, and you're like, that is hard. Like that is it's hard.
It's a
And
different beast.
yeah, so I get this audition, and my agent's like, you told me that you love these guys, you grew up on them, and I said, I know, I'm gonna go in there and make an ass of myself. And then like that's perfect. Go in there and do that. I said, yeah, but being funny is a different thing. So um, true story. At the time, I was in between gigs. I was catering, and I didn't have money for a haircut. So my hair is long. It's like down to here, right? And I'm tucking it behind my ears. And I go in, and I had bartended through college to pay for my education. And so I just, at one point they had asked us to improvise and just sort of, get into it, go off script. And I just thought of every cheesy thing I'd ever heard as a bartender overhearing, in the bar. And I kind of put that into my routine. So I get the call back. I'm shocked, and I go in for Keenan Ivory Wayans, and I'm literally trying not to look at him because to me he's a comedy god, right? And it's like it's not going to help my character. I got to stay in this place, and I did what the scenes they asked, and I remember just being so free. I'm playing a character who on one scene is like on drugs, who's high as a kite, and I just, I went into this falsetto and, just did all these silly things, and he was laughing behind the camera. And I got the call a few weeks later that I got it, and I will tell you, um, that was one of the most stressful acting gigs that I've ever done because, when you see those like nightclub scenes, there's like 300 extras, right? And to keep your sound clean, everyone has to mime in the background that they're having a cocktail, that they're talking. They cut the music off, and so all the focus is on you, and it's like, and action, be funny. And and that's why I say it was stressful, because there was so much self-doubt in it. And I remember like in the first couple days of filming, Keenan came up to me and he just said, I want you to go so far. Just go out into the stratosphere and let me pull you back if I need to. And that's all he needed to say. And that was the most helpful direction that I've got. Like that was, and from there I just, because he had reminded me of the audition. He was like, you were so free, and I was like, all right, it's just, dance like nobody's watching, and that's kind of what it was. So, but that project also paid for my short film that I had made, 2 years prior, that I was paying off. I'd shot it on film. It cost me personally like 40K. And so to both be in something that's become a cult classic and has brought people so much joy, and be able to make a period piece, that to be able to tell a story in short film and travel the world on the festival circuit on that was just a double win. And again, I'm just so grateful.
Oh, no kidding. There's a lesson right in there too, though, is, don't, there's a, from what you said, self-doubt. You had these doubts and stuff going through your head, but then you had that person who came in and said, look, I'll be that backstop for you. You know, be yourself. Be what you're feeling. Stop doubting yourself. And
Mhm.
you followed your intuition, and here we are.
And I think that that's like one of the, like, even as a director myself, um and again, White Chicks allowed itself to be big, right? It allowed itself to go into this place. Um but I think that as a director, that's part of the job, is building up your talent, building up your actors to feel safe to explore and try different things. And I don't want to speak for any of the other cast in it, but you know, um, like Terry Crews is unbelievable in it. He's unbelievable. And a true story about that, because folks don't know, like his dedication to playing that character and just how brilliant he is in it. It was scripted that he was just supposed to be dancing, I think, with glow sticks, right? As if like he drank what my character drank, kind of thing, and then he's, dancing the night away. Nobody knew that he was going to do that dance, right? So he had choreographed it. He had the night before, he had been working on it in his hotel room.
Mm.
And so when he came, and I mean, everybody was in like shock of how brilliant and his level of commitment to it, and I'm not at all surprised by his success over the last 2 decades. I mean, he is a workhorse, you know, and he's funny as hell. As
Yeah.
serious, like he can go from that stoic sort of like, you know, uh intimidating, sort of persona
Yeah.
to this silly sweetheart. But he's a very kind person, and I'm just so happy for him.
So like what led like I know there's a little bit of a mix with everything here, like acting and directing. Like where it sounds like there's something from both of that, but like where's your passion lie, or is it really in both of them? Is it just in that whole industry, in the creation of it, and bringing forward a vision?
I think the story dictates where you fall into that. um with Sheepdog, I was compelled to play Calvin. I sat in front of men and women for years, and I knew what it looked like,
Yeah.
and I knew that there was nobody else. I mean, if I had cast somebody to play it, like a name actor to play the part, what are they going to do in a month?
Yep.
What are they going to do in 3 months? It would have been an impersonation of a veteran. And
Man, see, oh man, that's
yeah,
so no, I'm getting
yeah,
chills because it's when you're around these other veterans and stuff and you're hearing these stories and you're interacting that with them, and like you said, you stayed with this guy for over a month. It just led into something to where you take on some of these burdens from that, and for you to be able to take that, portray it, amplify it, and use the craft that you really had built over these years to portray this, it's just something beautiful.
you know, there's a military operation, um, that my character talks about to his therapist in the film. And I had met again between Brad Link in Pittsburgh, George Rice in South Texas, Nick Carbonell up in Maine, and several other guys that were either in their squad or definitely in their unit. And so that inspired that military operation. I obviously was loosely based on that. But by the time I got to set, what's in the film was one take. I mean, I could see it. My character's talking about a sheep pen in Hegna, Iraq, where the military operation, went sideways on these guys. And I could see it. I mean, it wasn't just that I wrote these words on the page. Like, I could see it.
Yeah.
And that's a very different thing, because you get past the point of imagining it, right? To a point of like reliving it vicariously on behalf of those who actually experienced it on the day,
Yeah.
right? And I think that, like, our good friend Don McAllister, he came to the world premiere at the 40th Boston Film Festival, and he hadn't seen the film before. And he stood up during the Q&A, and he just said, he's very emotional, and he's like, I just have to ask you, brother, like, how did you get that look in your eye? You had
Mm.
the look. And the best I can answer is I did the work. I was never thinking on the day, oh, I got to have this look in my eyes. I just had to get as close as I possibly could to it, and then just tell the truth, and not overthink it. And when you're making, we're a low budget indie film, Sheepdog, and when you don't have money to throw at every problem, you have to rely on your instincts and your intuition. And so when you're relying on your instinct, you cannot overthink anything. It's literally in the moment. Let's go now. And you
Yeah.
just have to trust that the 13 years of work you did is going to carry the day, and that you've hired the right people around you, that you have the right support, and then you just got to let it, let it rip,
Yeah.
and see what happens. And that's what we did. So just talking about the passion, like when you're like about acting, directing, producing, writing, the story really dictates that. With Secret of Synchrony, um, funny enough, I played the part because I was the cheapest one to play it, right? Like I was like, I know the lines, I wrote it, um, and we have no money, um, so I'll just do it. And but it was also sort of like, for a horror thriller, it's actually a personal story of the persecution and subjugation of indigenous peoples. So there is like, something meaningful underneath all the scares.
Yeah.
Some critics didn't get that, which is unfortunate, but it's such a beautiful and meaningful film that I was trying to not just make something that was like run of the mill, and that's why I say it's very outside the box. Um, but that, directing, working with directing veterans, directing children. My dog's in it. I'm talking about Synchrony, and all of that was very much boot camp for what was to come for me, and I was very fortunate that I had that experience, because if you gave me $10 million today and you said all the footage for Sheepdog is gone, here's $10 million, you got to remake it, I wouldn't take your money, because I could never recreate it. It was lightning in a bottle. And going back to working on your instinct, it was a pressure cooker. And going back to Max saying it was in your eyes,
Yeah.
every single performance is literally walking the razor's edge in the movie. From Vondi Curtis Hall to Virginia Madsen, Dominic Famusa, Lily Cooper, Matt Dallas, could never recreate it. And that's why I feel also so grateful that we captured it. It's a moment in time that will now live
Yeah.
on, and from our responses all across the country on the film festival circuit, the audience response, especially from veterans of all conflicts and generations, um, is reaffirming. It's not just gratifying, it's reaffirming that the work that we did is up on the screen.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, I've said it before in Q&As, outside of my newborn son, it will be my life's greatest work. It will be, nothing will come close to this.
Man, Steven, that from everything I've seen and everything I've heard, and I know Mac has, he hasn't let anything out on you and stuff, but he's been like, man, you got to see this movie. Like it
Yeah.
is fantastic. I can't wait. This is something that's going to change a few things, and that's awesome. I mean, that's the whole reason why we're talking here. Is I'm like, man, like everything that you've done and seeing your progress through everything and seeing what I've seen anyway and what I've heard. It's exciting, and it's extremely admirable to see. I think we're about, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes until we're wrapping up, but let's talk about Teamhouse, what you're doing on that end and how that mission, how you're integrating the veterans into the film industry, how you're kind of giving them that leg up into there. It sounds like you're coaching. I don't know, like, let me in
Yeah,
a little bit more. I'm
sure.
slightly familiar, but
So I think, like, you know, in the time that I've spent in the veteran community, I think one of the most important things is a sense of purpose, right? And I think when you transition out of the military, oftentimes you lose that. And it's very difficult to go back to your communities. People have moved on. And whether you're able to utilize the GI Bill or you're looking for work, but you're also missing that camaraderie and that brotherhood that I talked about. And, you know, the film industry, um, it attracts some of the best, but all of the worst. And I thought, there's an opportunity here that I can hire and train veterans and give them that sense of purpose in my world anyway,
Yeah.
and and you know, for lack of a better term, to avoid stepping on any landmines going into it, like learn from my own mistakes and to some degree, you know, protect them, And so my agenda, if I had one with Teamhouse, is just being in service of veterans. And part of being a team leader is identifying people's strengths and their weaknesses. And so, typically, if I was to call it an interview process, we find out a bit of your background, your likes, dislikes, that sort of thing, and then you go through a myriad of different opportunities on a set. And you know, um, it was different on Synchrony because it was non-union, but union for acting, and then it
Yep.
was for Sheepdog, it was union across the board. And so there is a lot of bureaucracy and red tape in terms of like being able to, you can't just bring somebody on a set that's taking a job from, somebody that's in the union. Um, so, moving forward on this as well, it's like I'm hoping to raise funding that can also support this endeavor, this very ambitious endeavor. But ultimately it's to impart my knowledge to put veterans in a welcoming community on our set and to build lifelong relationships and again, just with the veterans that I've had the great fortune to continue to work with both on the first film and on Sheepdog. um, well, many of them have stayed in touch and are now like family, and again, that's just incredible, and something that I'm just so lucky to be a part of. I think that being a sounding board, being someone that knows how in terms of like putting the right people on a set. So for instance, on Synchrony, Mac, being Sergeant Major, he kind of like he was the go-to, right? So there were other veterans. We had some, Rudy Reyes, who did a beautiful job in the film. He's in it, and we had some Army vets and whatnot. And Mac was kind of the go-to. If he's the, I guess, the lieutenant colonel, maybe Rudy was the Rudy was the sergeant major, and I hope he doesn't take offense to that. I'm just saying, just like in terms of like running the show.
Yeah.
And by the way, there is another project we'll talk about at the end here. That's a heist project I wrote over COVID, which both of them are going to be a part of, which I'm so excited about. But there's structure, right? And there's a sense of community and there's a sense of trust. And that's a big thing, especially on a film set, and something I value deeply, and something that's almost innate in veterans. Um, and 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 so I look forward to growing the production company, and I look forward to creating up more opportunities uh, for veterans. And just to touch on really quickly too, the Gold Star family members that were in Sheepdog, um, some of them had lost loved ones in the military operation that my character talks about in it. But the beautiful thing about it was that to have us all together felt like we were at church together, like we were at Sunday school or something together. Like we would break for lunch, and then everyone would share stories, and there'd be laughter, and you know, of people that have made the ultimate sacrifice. Their families have, and that was very eye opening. And I gave everyone an option. You didn't have to be in front of the camera. You can also just be here. You can be a helping hand, or do nothing and just fellowship. But just be a part of it. You know
Yeah.
and I want to continue to create that environment on everything that I'm producing, and it's maybe you'll join us.
Oh man, I would love to down the road. That's Yikes. Throwing that one out there, but we'll see. That'd be wild, at least even just to come by and see, cover what you're doing there. That
Yeah.
is like, first, to hear the stuff back from Mac, the feedback from him, and for guys like that, for everything that he's been through, and to see what he's seen, but to open up and share some of that with you, and to also, entrust you. Um, that's big. And it says a lot about your character. It says a lot about what you're doing in those projects, and what you're doing out there within the industry and really the world. I mean, you're putting this stuff out there. This is something that is now on film, about to be uh, released in the very near future. Something that you've put together, and it's incredible to see, and it's amazing to hear the feedback from these guys, and to know, really to know that this is headed somewhere, Steven. It really is. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You've stayed the course. You haven't compromised yourself, and it's amazing to hear about. It's amazing to have you on here.
Well,
And
I appreciate that, man. And I gotta say, having read, as I said, I'm halfway through your book, and um, it's extraordinarily compelling. One of those things that people just don't know about is that you're not some podcaster. You were an RTO. You were in the Argandab. Like, that's where the British Empire fell. That's where Alexander the Great. That's where the Russians couldn't beat them there. And I think that, like, for me, just, and I know that you served under Mac, like, to everybody on our set, he's this lovable teddy bear, and that's amazing, right? And he exudes so much love. He can be serious. He can make you, toe the line, the whole thing. But when I'm reading your book, I mean, I know of Mac's service. I mean, we've talked, he's shared some stories, but I don't know it in finite detail the way you've laid it out in your book, where I'm like, I was telling my wife, and I was just like, we just, this is extraordinary, like what he's been through, and what y'all have been through. And I think it's important to share that, because I'm going to share this with you really quickly. When I was in Pittsburgh working with Brad Link, um, I typically, whenever I would work on the screenplay, I'd never drink with vets, right? Because the
mhm,
idea is, like, I'm not your drinking buddy. I'm here to
yeah.
respect your story and get this right. And after about 3 weeks of working with Brad, I was like, let's go for a beer. And we went out to a local, watering hole, and ordered our second beer, and I go to the bathroom, and I come back, and there's a group of girls that are standing with Brad, and Brad's kind of like smirking, and he's like, hey man, they want, they recognize you from White Chicks, they want a photo with you. And I said, oh yeah, yeah, sure, sure. And I take a quick photo, and I was looking at Brad looking at me taking the photo, and there was this like sense of pride and obviously amusement that here we are in this local watering hole in Pittsburgh. But I'm looking at him going, if they ever knew what he just shared with me over the last 3 weeks, I would be chopped liver. I'm I'm nothing compared to this extraordinary man's story. And I felt that way reading, your book as well, that the biggest disconnect that we have from the civilian and veteran communities is that we don't see that, and maybe for good reason. You guys are war fighters. You guys go out there, and you take care of business so that everybody, can sleep good at night. And it's astounding. And I don't think that, like, we talk a lot about this, and it's even in the film about thank you for your service, and how that often feels like a hollow gesture. And civilians don't know, for the most part, what to say or do, what's the etiquette. And sometimes it takes a lot of courage just to say thank you for your service. And I've always said, and this is based again on all my conversations over the years with vets, that they would rather someone say, how are you doing? And wait around to hear the answer, and build that. I mean, that's how you build community, you know? And so with saying that, it's an honor. It's an honor to talk to you, and I would encourage um, anyone to read your book, Man the Valley, and uh, it's I'm sure you carried a great responsibility in telling your story, but also the stories of others that you served with, and um and that's a beautiful thing, and it's important to put that stuff out there so it's preserved, you know,
Yeah,
and
no,
also so it can enlighten.
yeah, that's really, I mean, and that's kind of how these things start. You know, all of that was born from really, honestly, the best stuff in the book is from other people. I'm, extremely humbled by everything you just said. Quite honestly, that's huge to hear. Thank you. But at the same time, like it's those other guys that this is really about. And quite honestly, what's led to this podcast. That's another thing
Mhm.
too. Is one of the biggest things for me was going to school after service, kind of searching out and using school as that in between,
Mhm.
but was listening to podcasts. I just, instead of music, I had an hour long commute to school. So I started listening to podcasts, and the amount of information that I would get from listening to certain things. I would go into, I finished business school in 2.5 years, but I was bringing stuff to my marketing classes to where they're like, where are you coming up with this stuff? This is like so far above the levels of where we're at. And I'm like, it's literally a podcast that I learned all this from. And I started to see like, maybe if we can put this into a form that other veterans can hear and understand, we can spread this information among one another, and they can hear it in a format to where they understand from someone they understand, and hopefully it reaches them, and it kind of gives them those tools in that tool bag uh, to do stuff. Either what Rudy's doing, and being involved in the projects that you're doing as a stepping stone into maybe something, and you offering yourself as that mentor during everything that you're doing with Teamhouse and that you did through the production of Sheepdog, and how you've portrayed the veteran struggle out there, but also that purpose and reinstilling that purpose in there and showing this side of things for people. It's incredible, Steven. And I love what you're doing out there, and I can't wait to see this movie when it hits the theaters in 2025, man. I cannot wait.
Well, I appreciate that, and our hope is to be able to ensure that every veteran across the country, mental health worker, Gold Star family member can see it. We're working really hard on a very strategic plan for a theatrical release, um, and I'll obviously keep you posted on that. It's been an honor, and um, in case anyone thought I got the book, the name of the book wrong, it's Damn the Valley. I was saying Man the Valley because I just, uh, it's extraordinary, and your story is extraordinary too, and it's unbelievable. Before we say goodbye, though, you do have to tell us. I thought one of the interesting things in your journey was that you were late to the game at like 26, right?
Oh yeah.
And so
Yep.
you had gone to college, and you were going to originally you were going to go into the Marines, correct?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then, right. So at 26, and didn't you join during a time of war? Yeah, because if you go back, you're 26, yeah, it was pre 2000, it was post 2003.
Yep.
Yeah.
So high school, that's a whole, so high school was, that's when I was looking at the Marines, and we
Hmm.
weren't at war yet. 9/11 hadn't happened. And I
Yeah.
actually remember right where I was. It was the Waterbury satellite campus for UConn.
Yeah.
And I was in the cafeteria, and everybody starts crowding around the television. And like, what's going on? They're like, dude, you got to see this. Like, this is messed up. And we come over and we see the towers are hit, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
it's, hey, classes are canceled, and hey guys, everybody go home and be with your families. And I did. I felt like I missed the train to the fight, and life
Mm.
happened, and I was like, maybe this wasn't my purpose, and whatnot. But I still felt that call, and it was finally, I just through life and through um, just a few different instances to where I got brought to a point to where I was like, you know what, you need to make a decision. And if you're going to do this, you've always felt it in your heart to. Maybe this is something that you need to do, and it's probably your last chance to go out there and do it. So why have you shirked it? It doesn't seem to be working out right now, but you're also not following. It's been about you to this point. Like,
Mhm.
why not start giving back to others? This is what you wanted to do to start with, like, and you've kind of been led astray. Get back to it. And that's
Wow.
what led me to sign on the line.
Whoa. Yeah, I mean that was I mean, yeah, that's a big step, especially because I'm sure to some degree you knew what you were getting into. I mean, it wasn't you know, um when was your first deployment?
Oh, so I mean, man, that goes right. It was like a year within actually joining. So 2008 is the join, and then September
Oh, oh 9.
2009,
You're in country. Wow.
going in
Yeah.
country.
So,
So
yeah, you were yeah, that's wild. Well, again, that takes a lot of courage it speaks volumes of your character and it's wild, when you get into the book how you're kind of thrust like right into it and finding your way through it all and coming in kind of as like the older guy to I'm sure you served you know beside guys who had already seen. I know it's often rare that you see combat, it's not everybody, but I'm sure you were with people younger than you that had seen action and could share with you their experience and from the sublime to the grotesque. And there you are, kind of wet behind the ears, college kid coming into it, but you followed your calling. And that's what I think is so admirable. And if we could, if there's anything to take away from this conversation today, um, I followed mine. And it's a long road. And you it's been worthy, it's been gratifying, it's been at times incredibly challenging, but I would never have it any other way. And I'm certain, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm certain you would likely say the same.
oh, if not that, and just to add to that, some people say things about that. Either I'm sorry that happened to you with certain things. They kind of have come up to me, and I'm like, I'm not,
Hmm.
because it's built me into the like what I'm doing now and what I'm
Hmm.
doing with the work with other guys. And quite honestly, in looking back at everything, I can tell you for sure that within that valley and serving with those guys there and the people that I met and served with and still talk with, on a fairly regular basis, is that I was right where I needed to be. And
Yeah.
that right there, it's just maybe not at the time you don't see it, but then when you look back and you're like, man, but anybody that was in there, most of the people that were there would say the exact same thing. And to have a crew like that around you and to meet people like that or to have served with that, that's an incredible thing, because I don't think I've ever really met many other people that can hit those levels of type of person, type of moral character, and type of people
Mm.
that I had, really the fortune to meet and to serve with. It's an incredible thing.
Have you been able to stay in touch with some of your brothers? Like, I mean, I know that this is a big step with this podcast, and this is a great way to reach out. We've talked about Mac has been doing it sort of more behind the scenes with his, um, what does he call
Patrol
it?
chats.
Matt calls it what? Compassionate savages, I think is what he's calling it. But
That's
anyway,
something they, yeah, that's
yeah,
something they just started up.
yeah,
And this is the other thing actually with something with Mac. Like and he has done a bunch of things behind the scenes. There was a few episodes of the Man Cave
yeah,
and everything, but then he's kind of further found a little bit different of a purpose in there, where he's been doing patrol based chats, where he's sitting down with other veterans, combat veterans, guys that, we served with in the Argandab, guys from different, times of service that he experienced, from earlier on as well. And it's amazing to go to some of these. I go when I can, which isn't much. I really wish, but to hear someone speak up about something like, hey, guys, you know what? I'm dealing with this right now, and I really could use some help here, or, who has some advice? And always, there's always someone else out there that is like, I'm behind you. I've actually been here before. And it's really through each other that we're stronger together. I mean, that's one of the things that I started hashtagging everything, stronger together, because we really are. Like, that community, once you get a group of veterans together and they've kind of reform or form into that, it's almost instantaneously. Um, but informing those support systems and informing, these communities, it's a powerful thing. And I think that people don't, a lot of combat veterans have a tendency to self-isolate. And I
Hmm.
can tell you right now through my own experience, it's not the way to go.
Hmm.
It's getting out there among other people and meeting people such as, I mean, either through the patrol-based chats or, projects like you're doing with Teamhouse. Um, there's power in it, and it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and kudos to you for that. I mean, I can relate to that in so much that both of my brothers-in-laws are both combat vets, and um, living out, one lives in rural New Hampshire, the other here in rural, just north of here, rural Vermont, and that connective tissue is just not quite the same. And to the men that they served with, in that sense of community, and I think that's from the earlier days, that's what the Legion provided, right? It was the local place for vets to go, have a beer, shoot the shit, and connect on a level where they just couldn't connect with civilians for good reason.
Yeah.
And for the most part, we've lost that connective tissue, and that's why it's important for podcasts like this, or the work that Mac's doing, to try to be a part of that solution, to try to be a part of that connective tissue, because that self isolation oftentimes is not self-imposed. It's just a matter of geography. And then you just kind of get to a place where you're so far from that place you were when you were all keeping contact on Facebook. You were all like, whatever it was, text or phone calls, hey brother, checking in. And
Yeah.
as time goes by, you get older, it gets a little quieter. And I think that these sort of platforms are extremely important. And I would encourage anyone, from a humble opinion of a civilian, to take a step to engage. I think it's important.
I mean, I've seen it, and again, you went and lived with the guy, or you follow. I know the process. You're getting into the head of these guys there, and you're creating something to where you are living that as you're doing the film end of things. So, I mean, you get it. I know you get it from everything, within there.
Yeah.
Steven, look, hang tight really quick, but thank you for coming on the show. And again, 2025 Sheepdog. Can't wait to see it in theaters. And just hang tight. So I'm pretty sure I forgot to say before, you can find Sheepdog and more about Sheepdog the movie at simply sheepdogthemovie.com. They also have across their social media accounts at Sheepdog the Movie on Instagram, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Honestly, for more episodes like this, what would help if you guys just followed or subscribe, whichever one those are. I believe follow is the big one now, the one that doesn't cost anything, which I'm hoping that this show is never going to cost you anything, but without also running a ton of ads, because I know how distracting that can be. Until next time, next episode, next week, I know these constantly roll out, but your host, William Yeski, and hope to bring you yet another great episode of Veteran Success Story.